Hi, welcome to Strategy, Leadership, and Impact with your host, Blake Reframe. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Strategy, Leadership, and Impact. I'm really glad that you're able to join us again. I know I've been talking for quite a while now about the lineup of people I have that are coming on the podcast to have a conversation with us. And I know sometimes I call it interviews, but really they are more of a conversation when we're on the podcast having a chat. And this episode, we're had on Luke Richmond. And Luke is a professional adventurer, author, and motivational speaker, and he's based here in Tasmania, where I live as well. And he has his platform, OLOC Adventures, which stands for One Life, One Chance. And through his platform, he shares his philosophy that's centered around embracing life's challenges and making the most of every opportunity. So he's done a number of notable expeditions, and some he's still working on, such as the 7 Summits. And he's also holds a number of world records around ocean rowing. He's completed the Gobi Desert crossing with his wife Elise, as well as a number of other adventures that he's got a list as long as my arm. But definitely go over to his website, olocadventures.com.au, and have a look there at everything he has done. Like I said just before, he's also a published author. He has 3 books that he's published. The first one is One Life, One Chance, and that book's an account of his transformation from addiction to adventure. It's a great book. I've listened to the audiobook version of that, and it's really good, and I definitely encourage you to go have a listen or have a read, whichever you prefer. His second book was Vodka and Sandstorms, and this is the narratives from his expeditions, including the Gobi Desert crossing and kayaking the Murray River. And then his third book is 5 Years to Live, Reflections on Living a Life Fully, inspired by the question of what would one do with only 5 years to live. And Luke actually talks about this some in the podcast too. So I won't hold you up much longer. Without further ado, let's start the conversation. Like I mentioned just before, here talking with Luke Richmond today, who has been there and done that with lots of things. And I think he'd be someone great that we can hear from on the podcast. So thanks, Luke, for joining us.
Oh, mate, absolute pleasure. I'm glad we got some time to sit down. I know we're both very busy, especially yourself, so it's great to be here.
Yeah, and you're busy too. Every time I talk to you, you've been to another country, another continent, conquering something.
Busy in a different way, absolutely.
Yeah, which is a good segue kind of into the first bit, the introduction with you. And you've just recently completed a row from New Zealand back to Australia and set a new world record with that. How was that?
Mate, it was well, I guess on its face value, an unbelievable success. We got to smash this crossing in a time frame that hadn't been done before under human power. So we took out the record, which is always great. But we had actually planned for 60 or 70 days on the Tasman.
Oh, wow.
And this was my rowing partner and I, his 4th attempt and my 2nd attempt. So we had a lot of experience of getting destroyed out there by Mother Nature. So I guess it was one of monumental relief that we actually got to get it done. And because it was only 23 days out there, I've recovered quite well. So 4 weeks post-expedition, feeling great and ready to go again, as opposed to some of the big recovery in the past.
What, a third of the time you had expected it to take you nearly.
We had lots of leftover food.
Yeah, so that's interesting. With rowing, and I think you said you did, 2 hours on, 2 hours off, or 1 hour on, 1 hour off during the day?
Correct, yeah. So on a couple of crossings we've done in the past, we've trialled 2 hours on, 2 hours off, and that works fairly well. We've tried doing the 3 hours on, especially during the night shifts, to try and give us a bit more sleep. But we found by that 3rd hour, your performance is just lagging. The power into the oars, everything's just starting to drain. And so the speed of the boat's going down. So 2 hours was good. But then during the day, 1 hours were the most optimal shifts for us. You could put in some solid pressure on the oars, but then you got a nice bit of downtime, but not long enough to get too hot in the cabin or anything else. So 1 hour during the day, 2 hours at night. And if all goes well, you just keep repeating that 24-hour cycle over and over and over and hope you get there.
So potentially you're rowing for 12 hours a day each.
Spot on.
Which is incredible. So you'd be burning through the calories, so having to eat a lot of food just to maintain.
Massive. I mean, I budgeted in the food spread about 5,500 calories per day each. Wow. I'm a 92 kilo male. Grant's about 75, a little bit of a smaller guy. So it was probably okay for him, probably a little bit light on for me in terms of over that length of time. But you also couldn't eat that much. We struggled to get in the 5,500. You know, the 4 dehydrated meals, the chocolates, the salamis, the blocks of cheese, all the stuff we had on board, you just didn't want to eat it. And those downtimes, you wanted to sleep, clean yourself, just try and recover a bit, and punching in that food turned into a bit of a drain.
I'd imagine if you're not rowing, you're eating, and that that would get monotonous. But I guess just thinking about that, 22 or 23 days, just constantly, basically throwing your entire body at this whole project, and of course trying to keep your body fueled and things like that. The mindset to do something like that, a lot of people can't do that. After a day or two, they'd be spent. Just give up. So what was that like?
It's always the pillar of big expeditions is the mindset, because if your mind gives up on day one, it doesn't matter what your body can do, you're going home. But I guess this is my first rodeo. I've had a lot of experience in the outdoors and built out quite a robust landscape in terms of mindset. But this one being my second attempt, Grant's fourth, it had a lot weighing on it. So we chose not to have any media attention, none of that pressure for this one. We just wanted to shove off from the top of the North Island just to ease that mindset stress a little bit. We just wanted to focus on the drills, get this thing going. And we had a beautiful window appear earlier than we actually thought when a big cyclone hit Brisbane. We shoved off from the top of the North Island then, and it left a beautiful high pressure gap for us to really get a good start. And because we had the experience, we've had some robustness in the mindset, we just cracked on with our shift straight away. So we dialed in early, but we also got a little bit complacent in the first 3 days, and we took a bad capsize on day 4. Grant went swimming, I got blasted around in the cabin, and to be honest, it turned out to be a godsend because it woke us up. Say, hold on, idiots, you're on the Tasman now. Doesn't matter what your experience is or how confident you are, how strong your mindset is, this is Mother Nature. So we just dialed in our systems even more and cracked on, and we were very fortunate to get across in that timeline.
Yeah, I think that mindset too, you mentioned that Grant, it was his 4th time trying, it was your 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some of the summits that you've done, you've had multiple attempts.
Yep.
And these are things that I guess are incredibly physically and mentally taxing, but you keep going at it, keep on until you achieve it. And I guess that mindset too, that's a big macro mindset, I think, in that achievement and stuff. So whenever you think about your average person, and well, let me step back. When you look at people achieving things like yourself, you probably look at yourself as just the average guy, right? And I know that there's been things I've done where I look at myself, I'm just an average person. It's just something that you do. You just keep doing it. And there's a lot of people that consider themselves average people, and they go, well, I'm just an average person. I could never achieve that. Yeah. And is that one thing that you feel like potentially holds most people back? Or is it something that you feel like most people can overcome, being average to themselves and actually achieving things?
Oh, mate, I believe everybody can do everything. It's just a lack of reference. If people have sort of a childhood or past experiences where they've never suffered a little bit physically and mentally in the outdoors and built up a bit of a reference point, and then built that out over doing something harder, say starting with a 1-night camp in the backyard up to a 2-day trek, up to a week-long sufferfest, and on it goes. If they haven't got any of that experience or reference to it, well, of course they think they can't do it. But it doesn't take long to build that up, to ramp up that experience and robustness so that they can. But I believe everybody can do all the stuff that I've done. It's nothing special. I've just had a different trajectory to get there and a lot more past experiences that allowed me to do this stuff. But I didn't just get off the couch yesterday. I've been at this for over 20 years,
Yeah, so for you, that's your normal.
That's right,
It's just what you do now.
And motivation and mindset and all that changes over time. In the early days when I've just come out of the military, I think I found these expeditions and adventures were missions. They calmed me down, they felt good, I had a skill set for it, I was still quite young and probably extreme in my mindset. So my whole first batch of expeditions were built probably on medicine, making it feel good. It evolved into chasing the world records and probably feeding the young man ego a bit too much in my 20s, but that filled up a whole bunch of expeditions through that middle block. And in all my later years, up to now I'm 40, turning 41, was just for the love of exploring. So motivation has definitely changed over time as well.
That's good. And you mentioned going back to your military days, and I haven't read all 3 of your books, but I have listened to the audiobook of One Life, One Chance, which was your first book. and I found a lot of similarities there between you and myself, and that's one of the things, of course, piqued my interest.
Mm.
Right out of high school, you went into the Army as an infantryman,
Yep.
did East Timor, did quite a lot of other things
Yep.
during that experience, and then of course left the Army and struggled for a bit. It sounds like, really finding yourself, identifying who you are,
Yep.
what you're going to do, and that's something that I struggled with too whenever I left the Army. Of course, I was in a long time,
Yeah.
so it becomes a part of your identity, and trying to identify who you are after life after the military can be quite difficult. And I find a lot of veterans really struggle. What value do I bring? Who am I without the uniform?
Yep.
Things like that. And you see different paths people go down. And I find yours really interesting, that you continue to travel the world, which I think you kind of get that bug a bit in the military. And of course, you try to maintain your fitness, keeping that up. And then you had a period where you struggled with drug use and things like that.
Absolutely.
Which I know a lot of my mates who have left, they've either gone down that route for different reasons. Self-medication is the only way you can get that, I guess, that stimulus again, that high and things, that feeling and stuff. But talk a little bit about coming through that, and how, I know in your book you mentioned that you weren't sure if you were going to talk about it or not, and you were very raw in that and what you talked about, and exposes yourself a bit, which is a good thing, I think, because people need to know that you can hit rock bottom and use that as a platform to achieve and, again, identify yourself. But yeah, if you're okay with that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, of course. Oh, absolutely. It's one of those stories. It's the Incy Wincy spider story, isn't it? You take the fall and then figure some stuff out and get back up the spout, and that's a nice narrative that most people can relate to. But yeah, I guess I spun out of the Army, keen to go and travel and explore the world, but I was quite spun up, I guess. We'd had the pace of operations that you're all too familiar with, but it's also the behaviors and the decision making and everything that I'd known up until that point. I'm a young man who just turned 21. Everything was from the green machine, from the military. So to be rewarded in the military, you had to be aggressive, you had to be assertive, you had to be fairly extreme, because all that stuff was how you became an infantry soldier. But when you took that into the civilian environment, it's like, right, I'm a drinker. I'm going to be the best drinker out there. I'm going to take this to the extreme. And everything was about aggression and anger and, I guess, dominance, because you needed that on the battlefield. But when I found drink, I was going to be the best at it. When drugs came along, I was going to take that to the extreme as well. And I guess I was suppressing a lot of that emotion and a lot of those stories from back in the day. Well, not even back in the day, just from a few years prior. And yeah, it led you down a slippery slope. It builds up over time. And I guess my cliche rock bottom period was waking up in jail. I was in London, partying in London, living in London, working and traveling from there as my base during these years. Woke up in jail, don't know how I got there. I'd been on a 4-day bender, blacked out, woke up in this cell. And I was covered in my own filth, getting hosed down by the police, just this proper rock bottom, shameful moment. And I guess it took that, extreme shame of that moment to wake me up and realize, geez, this isn't me. I'm better than this. How the hell did I go from a soldier serving his country to this, no hoper in a jail cell? I was released from jail that next morning. You only spend an overnight when you're in those states in the UK, and out you go again into the wild streets. And I was still, I guess, at the crossroads, on the cusp of the crossroads. So I went home and got high, but I knew I had to change. So I was lucky I had one of my old unit mates on speed dial, called him up and he picked up. He was back in Australia. I said, mate, I need some help. I have to get out of this situation that I found myself in. And I'm sure you're all too familiar with the brotherhood that the Army and military provides for you. They're on call, ready to go. And he told me, literally, go to this place in Thailand where he trains at a big Muay Thai training camp. Just get out of the environment you're in, number one. Make that change to get over there. Start the physical fitness side of things that we'd grown used to in the military as well. Start to clean yourself up and then see what emerges. So I booked my flights then and there, high as a kite, got in the taxi, finished my drugs on the way to Heathrow, literally in the back of the black cab, and flew out to Thailand. Yeah. Got sick on the plane and then started to go cold turkey doing this thing called Muay Thai that I'd never done before. And I wasn't much of a fighter, to be honest, but 6 hours a day of that for a couple of months and I was clean again and everything started to come alive.
That's great. It's really good that you turn yourself around like that, actually.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of veterans, of course, like you said, too, there's ones you don't hear from 5, 10 years, and it doesn't matter if it's been 20, 30 years. If they pick up the phone and ring you or you ring them, they're going to be there. You're going to be there for them. And it is part of that fraternity, I guess, that you develop. And yeah, I can definitely associate with that aggression, that really aggressive type personality, which I had to develop that at my core. It's not who I am as a person, but I had to be that way in the Army. And you kind of mask, I guess, your true self. Me being an introvert, struggled with that. And also my upbringing too. So I was brought up in a very Christian household. So especially whenever we went overseas and things, some of our deployments, some of the things we had to do, it wasn't in line with my values.
For sure.
But it was in line with my job description. So you struggle there with lots of things, but how you overcome it. But one of the things I found is a lot of veterans, whenever they leave the service, you're alone. You're not around your mates all the time or constantly there. And say encouraging you. We actually would just have digs at each other all the time, but it was in a playful way, and that's how we encouraged each other.
Dark humor.
Yeah. And I can remember one day in Iraq standing there getting ready to go on a patrol, and we'd had some pretty bad times leading up to this one. And I remember looking around and looking at these soldiers, men and women to either side of me, and just being in awe at their courage just to show up every day. And once we leave the military, we don't have that courage, because a lot of that is driven by, I'm not showing up for myself, I'm showing up for my mates, because I'm not going to let them down. I'm going to have their back. And it's recognizing that even though we've left the service, we're still courageous. We can still be courageous and still drive ourselves and still show up. And I think we forget that sometimes.
Absolutely.
And that affects that mindset and things. And
it's almost a loss of purpose as well, mate, because on those jobs, you've got a mission focus that everyone's bought into. We believe this is the task for the night or the week or the 6 months. And that's your purpose, and your whole identity is built around that. Now, whether that's infantry or intel and some of the sneaky stuff you were doing, it's all built around this mission. So when you get out, well, you've lost your mission, you've lost your purpose, you don't know anything else. So that whole sense of identity crisis sets in. And for me, I think it was more after that rock bottom moment was about imposter syndromes, like who am I? And even today, 20 years later, 30 something big expeditions in the bank, I still think, that I can do better. Like, that's not me. I can do more than that.
You talk about 20 years later. That brings up another, I guess, question I have is, you talked about what really got you into doing all your adventures and things that you've been on and everything you've done, is you start off reading about it. And that kind of piqued your interest. And then one day you decided to take that first step and go. And you just went and did it. And I think, that first step that a lot of people got to get over, but you finally took that first step. And now 20 years later, did you ever think 20 years ago that you would have done everything you've done over the last 20 years, that you would have experienced everything? And I know it hasn't been easy either.
No way at all, mate. I mean, those thoughts of adventure really emerged during that period I was in Thailand doing the Muay Thai, when the chemicals are out of your body and then you get yourself what you'd call cleaned up. All your imagination and everything starts to come back online. And I had these little dreams and aspirations come up in that period of just adventures. And I'd grown up, as you mentioned, reading the Wilbur Smith novels and, the Biggles books. And then I got into the Shackleton, Amundsen and Scott, these stoic explorers of old. So those seeds were planted when I was younger, which I'm sure helped me during my military career. And then they lay dormant during this period of self-flagellation, you could call it. And so they'd come back up. And so, that's what I wanted to do. Could I measure up to these great men? Do I have that in me anymore? And that's what I wanted to do. So that was this new seed that was planted, but I was also broke. I had no job. I was very fortunate. My mum was out at a little town called Emerald, where we have some common background as well, out in the mines. She was just an administrator, but she got me a start in the coal mines, underground. So I flew straight back from Thailand and started underground. And fortunately, the boom was on. I had plenty of cash coming in, stacked up this big adventure fund, and then went on to Google looking for an adventure, something that measured up to this, thing that I wanted in my mind. And I found a list of mountains called the 7 Summits, and that was what I set out to do first of all. But in those early days, mate, sitting in the mess hall in the mines, looking for an adventure, to even think, in 20 years' time, you could be living this dream life of 4 to 5 adventures a year, all the money coming in from that, and just keep doing it. No chance.
No, it's amazing. I know in your book too, you talk about how you had a fundraise for some of those adventures and things,
Yeah, yeah.
which I'm sure just knowing you now, that probably would have been uncomfortable because I know
Massive.
just recently for Anzac Day, we're at the RSL here in town, and you don't promote yourself or big note yourself at all. And so I was doing a bit of that for you, but which is fine. I know a lot of people, they're very humble like that, and so I know that had to be uncomfortable. But you talk about the 7 summits, and you've done 6 out of the 7.
Yeah, in the early
which
days.
Is incredible. But I think it was when you're talking in your book about going up Denali in North America, that there had been an accident where some other climbers had passed away or gotten caught in the elements. Was that Denali?
That could have been the one before Aconcagua.
Yeah,
South America. Yep,
yeah.
That's it.
You talked about that, and I guess being confronted with something like that, because obviously you were in the same place, could happen to you. They're probably thinking the same thing. I'm going up. It's not going to happen to me. And I know that I'm sure that every one of my mates I've lost either overseas or other things that I've responded to with emergency services, no one ever thought it would happen to them. But when you're confronted like that, it becomes very real. And
absolutely,
you feel, I guess, you're vulnerable and stuff. And I guess overcoming that and still going on with that, because you're on a mission, like you said, to accomplish something, and you're still getting high, just in a different way, like figuratively actually.
Absolutely, yeah, neurotransmitter,
yeah. How do you, when confronted with your own mortality and things like that, is there anything that you've done to overcome it? Did you push it away? How do you, I guess, deal with that in your own mind?
Mate, once again, that's another sliding scale, because in the early days, there's a reason the military, especially the infantry, is made up of young men, because you lack that developed prefrontal cortex of long-term risk evaluation. So you didn't have to worry about that in your younger years. If they wanted to charge a gun pit, you're going to charge a gun pit because you didn't really weigh it up properly, right? Yeah. Which is an essential service for a military person. So I think I was still in my early 20s. So when we're on Aconcagua, 4 days before our summit push, a Spanish team got caught out in the elements. Big storm came in. They didn't have the correct equipment with them, got lost in the whiteout, and then died of exposure. So when we were heading up 4 days later, I came across one of these guys just on the side of the route, wrapped in a silver blanket, just frozen solid. And absolutely, it's confronting. It wasn't my first dead body, but it's now someone that was probably a lot more skilled to be there than I was. This was my literally first expedition ever that I'd been on. No skill set, didn't know what I was doing. I literally bought all the equipment from the website list and just ordered it, got sent to the mines, and off I went. So you weigh it up a little bit differently. But I think I still had that underdeveloped risk evaluation. I just said, no, that's not going to happen to me. We've got a good team around me. The weather was playing ball, and we cracked on. And fortunately, we succeeded. Perfect summit day, good pictures, and back down you go. So then it builds a reference point of, okay, that was there, some exposure, but we succeeded. I had that happen a bunch of times. Now, that can also be a bit of a slippery slope where you've had all these past successes. So that when the next crisis eventuates, you think, oh no, we've got this in the bag. We've won every time we've been out there. Yeah. I think by the time the next critical moments had come around, I was already in my 30s. So now I've got this long-term risk evaluation starting to develop, but also had quite a lot of experience and skill set, and everything starts to build in. So that gut intuition is there now, so that you can start making a lot better judgment calls in the mountains or on expeditions that we do these days. Yeah.
No, it's incredible. It's interesting. You say the more experience sometimes we have, the more complacent we tend to get. And then you look at pilots crashing. One of the biggest demographics around people crashing are ones that have over 1,000 hours, because they get complacent, and they just get too relaxed. And that's something I try to be very cognizant about when I'm doing things. I know, having been a volunteer firefighter and a paid firefighter for several years, I get very relaxed at scenes because I'm comfortable with it, and it's making sure I'm not getting too comfortable. And that risk management side of things. When we're young and dumb, we don't think about that stuff, obviously, because we're going to live forever. We're invincible and everything else. And we got it until we are faced with it, and we hope it's not the last time we're faced with it because it's too much. But probably like yourself, mate, my ego died a long time ago. That young man, that chasing world records, the ego side of it's all gone. So even our most recent trip to the Himalaya, climbing a mountain called Cholotse, we came to a point on that
mountain, we were probably only 2 hours from the summit on the summit ridge, but all the fixed line had been blasted away. Now, it wasn't a technically crazy route, you know, it was just a standard ridge line, probably 2 foot wide, you could walk along. But with no fixed line there, you've got your axe, you're either roped together or you're walking solo. Now, 2 people in our team didn't have axes, so you got to rope into these people. Now, if they start to fall, the likelihood of me being able to arrest that fall is very low, you know, especially on these slopes. So there's just a couple of little things there that didn't stack up. So we packed it up right there on the ridge and said, guys, it's just not happening today. Let's head down. Even though the weather was perfect, likelihood of tragedy could have been low, but the consequence of it going wrong is just total death and probably multiple fatalities. So you just turn around and go home. The mountains aren't going anywhere.
I think, yeah, that's a really good point. And sometimes it's razor thin margins that you have. If you look at a difference of, 2 to 3 degrees in temperature can change the entire environment. Wind speeds pick up just slightly is completely different. Ego's something. So I talk about my son a lot. My son James, he's young teens, 13, soon to be 14, and I tell him all the time, ego kills, and ego gets a lot of, especially males, into situations they can't get out of or they can't. They're not prepared for. And so we got to get over our ego, whether it's driving, confronting people and things. I said, if you look at the reason why a lot of people get into fights and stuff, it's over ego.
For sure.
Yeah, because your ego's been damaged. Well, so what? Who cares? And getting over that, I think you do get to a certain point in life where you don't care about your ego anymore and what other people think, and you're just going to do what's best for you. And I think with that, you do start managing stuff a bit better, not letting ego drive you and letting that risk management kind of framework you develop drive you, and understanding the consequences. And sometimes you have to experience that to really set it in.
And then it's just a compounding effect. You start making these better calls. Yeah, you don't succeed that time, but that call led you into something else and you learn more lessons. And I've found sponsors over time don't care whether it's a success or a failure. The good lessons and the good stories come from the failures. If you went on a trip and dominated and got a record, it's okay, but it's not the same value. So it didn't matter in that sense either. There's just so many lessons along the way.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing you just touched on too, that, we can be defined by our failures just as much as our successes. And I know now there is a big push that people, to embrace your failures a bit more. We don't always want to be failing. Obviously, we want to learn from our failures. That's why, changing that mindset, it's not a failure, it's a learning point, I guess. And because I know that, like I said, there's a couple summits you mentioned that you've tried to summit 2 or 3 times and gotten turned back or had made a decision to go back, either conditions have changed or like you just mentioned. How important are those? I guess you kind of just mentioned it too, in comparison to the times you've gone and it's gone perfect and you've achieved. But how important are those setbacks and those failures to, I guess,
mate,
your career?
I think those failures and those setbacks in the early days, or even recently when we turn around, that's why I'm here now. I think if you didn't have the failures, I'd be dead.
Yeah.
You have too many good wins, then you get a bit complacent, like you said, then little decisions can lead to big consequences. But my first big failure was in those early days on the 7 summits was on a non-technical peak in Russia called Mount Elbrus. Had 1 attempt, bad weather, 2nd attempt, bad weather, and a short window in country to get this thing done. So after that second failure, I'm huddled behind a sort of a rock windbreak with my guide, a little Russian fella named Valentin. But I knew if we'd turned around this second push, I was going to run out of days, had to get out of the country, and I would fail on this expedition. Young, ego, going hard, driving hard as a young man, needed this success, I guess, to legitimize myself in this, post-drug addiction phase. So there's a lot of pressure there and a lot of inexperience. Luckily, Valentin, even though he was quite young, he'd grown up in a much harsher environment than me. And he turned to me and said, look, it's better to come to this mountain 10 times and go home than to come once and never go home.
Good point.
And straight away, it made such logical sense. So spot on. We turned around, we got chased down by the storm and called it a day. But that lesson has served me so well since then. Knowing the mountains aren't going anywhere, there's great lessons to be learned along the way, sponsors don't care. So it was never a failure. That was more of a success.
That's a really good point. If you were to talk to someone who, let's say, has worked a desk job their entire life, sometimes taking risks is just putting themselves out there on a project or something like that, and they see the failure as, it's the end of my career, I'm over, I'm done with, my reputation is shot. Because oftentimes, there's very, very few jobs, it's such a small minority, where failure means death. You know,
Yep.
failure is normally it's a hit to your reputation.
It's a bad email.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You might lose a bit of money. You know,
Yeah.
project doesn't get done on time, things like that. I guess relating that to what you're doing, where it is life or death. You know, if you fail or make a bad decision, how do they overcome that? Like I know that's where a lot of people they will get stuck on these little things, and they use that to define them. And I think you're living proof that your past does not define your future.
For sure.
You know, and where you could potentially be. And so, how does someone who isn't necessarily faced with that kind of consequence, but it still to them is just as bad, how do they overcome that? What advice would you give someone?
Man, it's a multi-layered thing, isn't it? Because if people don't have any experience of, I guess, challenging themselves, number one, but they found themselves in a role where there's a lot of insecurity, number two, you know, they won't take any chances. But one thing I always try and come back to, especially here in Australia or in the US or one of these beautiful Western democracies, is we can only fall so far.
Yeah.
You know, so the risk when you take a chance, you know, it's not a big consequence. You know, you step up at a meeting and make a statement. Oh, people don't like it, but you know, okay, that didn't go so well. It doesn't really matter. You lose a job, you go get another one. You know, you're not in a country where if you lose your job, you don't eat or, you know, you go without.
You get executed if you say the wrong
That's
thing.
You're exactly right. Yes, we have this safety net for us here in Australia where you can try anything you want, any job you want, any experience you want, you know, pending funding and motivation, you can go and do, because if you just absolutely destroy it or fail, you only fall so far and you can start again. So I always like to have that as the 20,000 foot view of it. So you can only fall so far. But oh man, it's person to person, isn't it? I'd say everybody just take every chance you can. Say yes to every single thing, because that's how there's this effect in biology and nature called bifurcation. You must have perception, action, cognition to do something if you want change. If you're happy with where you are and you just want to stay on that track for the rest of your life, beautiful. But if you really deep down think you're better and you want change, you must take action. So you perceived you want to be better, you must take action and cognition to make that happen. And then this beautiful bifurcating effect can lead to anywhere. You don't know where you could be in 10 years or 15 years time, but you must take action.
What's that saying? Most people, they overestimate what they can achieve in a year, but they underestimate what they can achieve in 10.
Absolutely.
And, I think it's exactly right, because like I said, once things kind of start happening and you build this momentum, they just keep happening and you keep building. And
always remember that nothing in nature is linear. It's not like, okay, I'm going to make this change now and I'm going to head up on this 45-degree angle of success for the next 20 years. Nothing in nature is like that. That's why every training program fails that has that type of trajectory. Keep adding weight and in 6 months you'll be this strong. Doesn't work. Yeah. It's this constant hill and valley type diagram, if you can imagine the ups and downs, heading on a general trajectory of where you want to be, but there's going to be failures and little downs all the way along that route.
And I've never met anybody who's like wildly successful who hasn't had setbacks.
Sure.
In some way, shape, or form.
Sure.
And if you look at, I guess, well, yourself and a lot of really successful people, at some point they've hit rock bottom. And there's a lot of people that, unfortunately get to those states and they decide to take, a different way out, whether it's taking their own life, which is unfortunate, or they let that define them and that's who they are the rest of their life and they never really recover. And I guess it's that mindset. And I think, like you said, everybody has the potential. They just need to realize that. And remember, I used to coach weightlifters and I use a lot of weightlifting analogies, but I had a lady that, older lady, she's in her 40s, that I was coaching, and it was interesting because I always, push them, and we want to strive to be the best. We're going to be the top. If we're winning gold medals. And it's not about ego; it's about pushing ourselves to be the best we can within reason.
Yeah, you're giving this Olympic coaching at the nursing home, mate. I love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's go.
Yeah. But it's we're going to recover. We're going to make sure we're eating. We're make sure we're looking after ourselves, but we're trying to build a holistic person.
For sure.
And her mindset though was, and this is how she was raised. Well, she said her mother always told her, someone has to always finish last. Why shouldn't it just be you?
Oof.
And that was what this person had actually led most of her life with, that belief. And I was kind of raised differently. Is, someone has to finish first. Why not me? There's a big difference in the amount of work you have to put in and dedication and stuff, which is why I tell people, motivation, it's fleeting. Like, use motivation to get you started, but self-discipline is going to keep you going. But it's interesting that there's a lot of people in the world that's their mindset. It's like, well, someone has to be last, why isn't it me? And I don't have to work as hard.
And mate, that's a dangerous thing. Hey, that one seed that was planted at such a young age, the power of that belief can change your biology. Yeah. Like, thought creates biology at the end of the day. And there's a little thing we do right now. You and I, imagine you and I are sitting here. I've got a lemon. I'll put that on the table. I'm going to slice up this lemon. You're going to take a slice, but I'll take a slice. We'll put that in our mouths right now. We'll bite into it. We're going to roll that around on our tongue.
Yeah.
Now, most likely, just like me, you've started to salivate.
Yeah.
Now, that was the thought of taking a bit of lemon and putting it in our mouths that gave rise to matter. So that's biology. So that's thought creating biology. So when you plant a seed like that in people, it can have tragic outcomes. Just as a positive seed planted can have very, very good outcomes, but you never want to be the positive person. You don't want to be the super negative person. You've got to have that balance, because nothing's linear. But that's such a devastating thing to hear, because it happens every single day. Someone gets injured, mate, you're never going to walk again. That's it. They have that belief set and they will never walk again. So you just cannot say that sort of stuff. And it's tragic to hear.
It reminds me, when I was being medically discharged out of the Army, I was struggling with PTSD, depression, things like that at the time. I was at a really low point. And I remember the doctor from the VA, from the Veterans Affairs, actually made a statement in one of my kind of final appointments. He said, you're never going to be able to operate in society normally. Now, at first I didn't know what that meant. I remember thinking about it, and I thought, how many veterans is he telling that to, that they believe it? They go, that's me now. I'm never going to be normal. What is normal? And and you go, that's so, I guess, damning, I guess, in a way. But my thought was actually, well, you don't know me, and that's not going to be me.
Yep.
And whether or not I fit in normally, I really don't care. Because I'm normal for myself. I've definitely developed on those. Either I'm not here to make everybody happy. The people I get along with are the ones I get along with. The ones I don't, oh well.
And why not change that word from normal to just different? Maybe you're going to go through life differently. Some of it's going to be really good from all the discipline and fitness and everything you've achieved. Some of it might be a little bit bad because of the aggression and anger. Like, explain it to these guys and girls. Don't just say you'll never be normal again. Terrible.
That's it. But there's someone, speaking from a position of authority, just like a parent to a child, like, you said before. And I guess we have to be careful with our words sometimes and how we say stuff and what we grasp onto, I think, just mentally what we grasp on the things that people say and how much credibility we're putting in that.
For sure.
It's a really good point though.
Power of words. Thought creates biology, mate. And especially with, like, I don't have kids myself. I've got lots of nephews and nieces. But I found with them, like, words are very important, but they're also so young that they have an abundance of mirror neurons in their brain. So this is going to mirror what you do. So if you're out taking action and training and hiking and doing all this stuff, well, they just start to mirror that behavior. If you're sitting inside on the couch, playing on your phone, well, they'll mirror that behavior as well. So actions over just words are very important.
I think it's a good point too with your nieces and nephews. They see someone like you doing these things you're doing, which to them, you're just Uncle Luke.
And that becomes their normal. Yeah.
Then it normalizes this achievement where people that haven't grown up around something like that or been exposed to that, to know them, they go, well, that's amazing. It's incredible. It's a superhero. He's up on top of these mountains with a cape.
Spot on.
We put it, I guess, outside of the achievable limits of our mind, which you've mentioned the mindset before. Like, the mind can overcome so much or can push us to do so much.
And that leads you into this whole world of epigenetics, where when I started in adventures, it's very hard to find a lot of adventures. Google was, still this fresh tool. Before that, they had nothing. You hear a story in the newspaper about some great alpine climber doing this one thing, and that's all you heard about. These days, these young kids have got access to every crazy thing that gets done in a second, which is great because they see that as, oh, that's normal. I'm going to do the next thing. So you have this epigenetic effect where people are doing some of the most unbelievable things for humans to be doing on a daily basis. And it's just compounding and compounding. And that's what I hope to do for my nephews and nieces. They see us rowing into Coffs Harbour after crossing the Tasman, and they say, oh, that was great, that's normal, what can I do?
Just another day.
Yeah, absolutely. They don't have to start at ground zero. They've got this new baseline of what's achievable.
Mentioned the internet and, talk about like social media and stuff. And I know we've kind of had a short discussion about it. How dangerous do you think some of these fake influencers are who are saying they're achieving these things or doing these things, but they actually haven't? The posers or wannabes and stuff. Yeah. How dangerous do you think something like that is?
I think it's a very tough landscape to navigate for kids these days. I think in its inception, it was a really nice tool, sharing, caring, photos going around, videos going around. Once it turned into a real growth-driven enterprise of advertising and people started making livings out of these tools, well, that can only lead to fallacy. You just see liars, imposters, because it's all about the growth. Yeah, it's that multinational thing. As soon as growth's the issue, well then, care and morals and ethics and everything starts to go out the window. So today, I know it's a tool, but to be honest, mate, after so much time in the outdoors and the career I have, I'm just leaning more and more away from it. Yeah. I use the books and speaking as my main domain and little bits of posting here and there, but it's just such a very, very tough landscape. So then if you use that from a kid's lens, they're seeing this stuff. It's just like you have a bunch of people that you can't control what they're telling your kids or how they're influencing your kids. And your kids are going to mirror that behavior. Yeah. So it's very, very dangerous, I think. I mean, how do you navigate that with James?
Well, he doesn't have social media.
Yep.
He did have a YouTube channel he started for a short time. We stopped that. There was some pretty inappropriate comments made and stuff, and you look at it and go, wow. It's definitely not something someone would walk up on the side of the street and tell you because, well, one, they wouldn't be walking much longer.
And we know what one thought or one seed can lead to. You got to control that. That's crazy.
Exactly. And we've talked about that. And I know you have social media, but you're not all over social media.
No.
I can see you're very reserved on there and things. And that's where probably for myself over the last year or two in particular, I've really stepped back more and more from like the Instagram and Facebook and all these other things. And I do still do a lot on LinkedIn, but I keep it, to a professional level.
Yep.
And that's why I don't mind that one as much. But some of the other ones, they were getting incredibly toxic. Just the toxicity going around. And but one of the things I noticed, there's been this massive, and I know it's been around forever, but it's more prevalent now, it seems, because we're seeing it, is this accomplish things quickly. It's lose the weight in 90 days or 30 days. It's get this strong. It's accomplish these things. And I think you had mentioned it before. If you look at the Everest climb now, if you have enough money, somebody said, if you have enough money, you can do anything. So you get people that, because they have money, they don't want to do the work, and they show up, and they're the ones that are dying on, on these mountains and things like that. But I guess, what's the difference between success and just paying somebody for it versus success putting in the work?
Mate, you're talking about instant gratification. And I guess when we're talking about that social media landscape, it's all about dopamine-driven behavior. So you get a like, someone makes a nice comment, there's this little dopamine spike. Oh, cool, I'll put up a better picture. Oh, I didn't get the traction. Oh, what do? Oh, I'll take off another layer of clothing. Oh, that got me there. More likes, more photos. So it's just this dopamine cycle, which is a gambling cycle, which is my adrenaline-seeking behavior. It's all built around that dopamine. And I guess anticipatory dopamine more so. When you start building that in from a young age where, okay, I want this, bang, there it is. Didn't do anything for it. It got delivered to me on the couch, or I had my little hit. I got sorted. And that grows into adulthood. That could have a tragic outcome as well. Because, I didn't get the job. Oh, why? I'd applied for it. I should have got it.
I deserve it.
Oh, yeah, and you fail and that's it. It's all over. It's tragic. You didn't get this thing. And they haven't built up, I guess, patterns of behavior and that resilience of, I'd like to see my mate. That'll be a nice experience, but I have to cycle my bike across town. I've got to knock on the door. He's not there. He's at the footy field. Okay, I'm going to cycle over there. You've done about 10 Ks. See your mate. You have a nice little chat, catch up, and you go home. So you got your dopamine hit, but it took effort. Yeah. That builds in a pattern of behavior of work. Yeah, so okay, I'm going to be that CEO one day, but I've got to put in these work before that. So two totally different trajectories in life. And that's something we're still trying to figure out now, is how to control these tools, because they are reprogramming the neurotransmitters in our kids.
Yeah, that's it. That instant gratification. Also that that validation. as well. I mean, it's we're looking for external validation versus internal validation, and I never really picked up on it till someone mentioned to me. They said, "Look at a lot of people's posts. It's about I, me. Look at me," and that's the external validation versus posting about something someone else is doing. Look at this person; they're doing great things.
Yep.
And that opened my eyes up to that, where I never caught that. Oh yeah, I didn't see that thing, and so I try to think about that now more myself whenever. Because I actually find a lot more gratification personally when I help other people achieve, or I see other people achieving and promoting them. And
absolutely, man, that's a great point. Hey, great point.
Yeah.
I didn't realize the power of that. I've been sort of pushing expeditions really hard for a long time now. And then my same buddy that I rode the Tasman with had a project he wanted to do as an individual and swim around Phuket. I became his team leader on the support boat, managing the kayak guys, the drones, the video crew, and being in the water for him for every single swimming second in my little rubber kayak, feeding and watering him. That experience was all about getting him over the line, sharing that experience with him. And it was a massive dopamine hit for me. By the end, I'm crying, this huge sense of achievement. And it was all about him. And that was my first experience of that. So this is amazing. Yeah. So then we start taking people to the mountains. I start mentoring some other teams on how they can do their first ocean row and start doing that type of stuff. It's such a great feeling.
Mentoring James and I now, so we're getting ready to go to Nepal, hopefully in a few months. And,
yes.
And do a couple peaks, of course, over 6,000 meters, which will be just incredible. And we appreciate it too, all that advice. And we're leaning on that experience too. So,
yeah. I can't wait to see how you go over there. It's probably my second home. Probably done 10 trips over there now. The mountains are just incredible. Until you lay eyes on 8,000 meter peaks and you're standing on top of a 6,000 meter peak when you see them, it's a very special and unique moment, but you have to earn it.
Oh yeah. Yep. Yeah, that's it. And I think that's something that, I'm trying to instill in James at his age, is that anything worth working for is worth having, and actually being able to, or not being able to, but realizing that to have those good things, it's not going to come easy. You're going to have to work for it.
Yep.
And like you said, getting that dopamine hit at the end when you have worked for it and what it means to you. We've always had the philosophy that I think I told you around birthdays and Christmas. We don't necessarily buy a lot of gifts. We buy, I'm not going to say buy experiences, but we do experiences, whether it's traveling somewhere, you going somewhere. So usually around his birthday, which is in October, which is when we're looking at going to Nepal, we usually do some kind of trip to do something, our little adventures then, to build those experiences. But you understand that right now, even though that's months away, we're doing the work now to make that, and we'll make it a little bit easier, but it still isn't going to be easy. But, we're putting in the hours now, pounding the feet on the ground, carrying the packs.
I mean, that's all that matters. Yeah. Experiences, trust me, is all that matters. I mean, you're sitting here in Tassie. We both live in Tassie. Yeah. We're in a little wooden shack. Cheap little shack, but this little shack is our base camp of experiences.
Oh yeah.
Like, just to give the listeners a bit of a brief overview, every wall is covered in a picture from an expedition. It's just wall to wall catalogue of beautiful experiences. Yeah. Now we could have gone and bought a massive property somewhere in a city and be living that lifestyle with debt and everything else, but we chose the route that you're naturally progressing to, of one of experiences.
That's it.
Humble life of just wickedness.
I think you mentioned before about the money and the cost, and a lot of these things, it can cost a lot of money.
Massive.
Not just time, but there's ways you can do it on a budget too.
Absolutely.
And that's, just moving away from that leadership bit a little bit now, but it doesn't take a lot of money to have great experiences. It doesn't take any money to have a great experience. It takes a lot of physical stuff sometimes too, but when we travel, we don't stay in fancy hotels. We either camp or we're staying like in a caravan park, in a cabin.
Yep.
Because us, it's not I don't care where I lay my head, as long as I get a good night's sleep. I'm there to experience everything else, and that's how we do it. And we're talking about staying in the tea houses, going up to Everest Base Camp, and that's a luxury, having four walls around you. So,
you and I are used to sleeping in the bush, mate.
It's like, I remember several years ago, James and I did a survival, it was a 4-day survival thing with a fella in the NT, and it was geared toward juniors, for kids and stuff, but it was still a really great experience. And when we showed up, they said, "I'll bring something for shelter." And when we showed up, all the other families there with their kids had these tents and stuff, these massive tents, and I brought a poncho.
Love it. So good.
And we put that up, and everybody's like, "Are you going to be okay sleeping under that?" I was like, "I slept under one of these for years. Like, it's great. This is luxury. It keeps the rain off our off our faces. But yeah, we're literally in our sleeping bags underneath this poncho, and that's our shelter. And it's like, well, this is it. And yeah, you said when that's, I wouldn't say the norm, but when you're used to those things, you always call it embrace the suck.
Yeah. But that's ingrained in, I guess, us military guys, especially even today, mate. If I get put up in a 5-star because I'm doing a speaking event, I can't sleep in those places.
Yeah.
Lights on everywhere, noise and everything else. I can't do it. You put me out here in the bush, in the darkness.
Sleep like a baby.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. We had that when I was home from one of my deployments, the first night sleeping in my bed, I freaked out. And I couldn't do it. I took my blanket and I went out and I slept in the yard.
Wow.
Because I felt comfortable. It was a lot of other things around that too, because you really feel unsafe because no one's up watching your back. No one's watching.
Yeah, we got your gat with you. Yep.
Yeah, that's it. And so you feel really exposed, but I felt safe and I felt comfortable outside. So I went and laid down in the yard, and I slept like a baby. But
and that's, I guess, sorry to interrupt you. That's a good example of when you've got those experiences. I'm the same. You put me outdoors, feel very, very safe. When you put me in a town, well, there's lots of risk, lots of exposure and everything else. But that's what experiences can also deliver to a person in their lives. If you go and do lots of experiences, that sense of security then grows in you. Yeah. So talking back to the person who's sitting in a meeting and doesn't know if they should act or not, well, if you start having all these experiences, you have this internal sense of confidence and security and self-esteem where those thoughts have dissipated. So there's no fear of acting anymore. And that leads to that bifurcating effect we were talking about earlier. Yeah. So it all just ties in beautifully, these past experiences.
Oh yeah, exactly. But I think you have to put yourself in those situations to get that experience.
Yes. Must take action.
Yeah. I think that's where I see a lot of people where they fall short. It's just taking that first step to get in that situation, to have that experience. And I think, for me, it does become natural once you do that. It's okay. I'm not afraid. I back myself. I have confidence in myself, and it's not being ego driven. It's confidence driven. So like you said, there's only so far we can fall.
Yep.
Especially in a country where we live here. And I love Australia, and I think a lot of people really take it for granted, the safety and security we do have here, and also the ability to really achieve whatever it is you want.
Yep.
Yeah, but you have to take that first step. And if we don't ever take any of those first steps, we never grow.
Yeah. And one thing you have to understand is your nervous system, so your ingrained survival ability, it doesn't know whether you're in a meeting or a conference or you're outdoors on a mountain. Yeah. It's just your perception of those environments. So when you start using the outdoors as a training tool, even if it's just your first night camping in your backyard, then the 2-day trek, and then it just goes on and on and on, it builds these references of you stepping out into the environment, getting perturbed by stress, controlling that arousal, and being okay with it. So next time you're in the conference room and you're walking up to a group of the heavy-hitting high rollers, you won't have that same stress arousal because you've built up that resilience in the outdoors. Your nervous system doesn't know the difference. It's just your perception of it.
That's a really good point.
Yeah,
that's great. And talk about you're talking about your mate when he went and swam in Phuket, and you were the team leader, and having that team around you. How important is it? And I have my own answer to this question, but how important is it the type of people you have around you in your inner circle, your team?
Oh yeah, this is a very good one. I mean, on that one, I didn't get to choose my team. It was a charitable event, so you used to have volunteers, and this can be a tough landscape to navigate, as you know. So all good people, they all want to help. Such different life experiences and skill sets. So what I tended to do is you have to figure out these people quick. Meet everybody, we're starting tomorrow, next day you're out on the boat, everyone's trying to survive in this little boat in the hot as hell Phuket heat, doing shifts of swimming and everything else. I did get to know these people really well, so I took some one-on-one conversation, just like we're having now. We're taking the layers off, getting to know each other, digging deeper and deeper, finding out who these people are. So one of the guys was a little bit of an irritating character, rubs everyone up the wrong way. But after I had this back and forth with him just for an hour, so sitting on the boat, I figured out, this guy, he's actually a bit of a bodyguard. He really is a bit of a protector. So I found a role for him and said, mate, your job, and this is a very important role, it's critical to our mission. I really hope you can help us with this, is to be in the little rubber kayak out in front of everyone, keeping watch, making sure the boats stay away, the jet skis, you're our bodyguard. Oh, he loved it. He's like, mate, that's me. I'm you. Yeah, I've got you. And he took up this role and just ran with it. And the rest of his irritating behaviors fell away because he had his job, he had his mission, he was helping the team. It's like, perfect, that guy's sorted. And I worked out everybody in that sense. And the mission was a success. As opposed you rocking up to the ready room with a bunch of heavy hitters who have an amazing skill set. You know you can rely on them to charge gun pits, blast doors, do whatever. Well, then it's just, how's the mission planning? You know, because we know we've got the tools to get this job done. So there's different landscapes.
Good point.
How do you rock and roll if you have a total bunch of beginners and you have a pretty critical mission to execute?
Sometimes you look at timing, you know, how much time do I have to work with these people? How much time do I have to get to know them? You obviously very quickly separate who's going to be an asset, who's going to be a liability. And then how do I turn those liabilities in? Where's the opportunity there to make them an asset? I've worked with people quite well before who I would never have like a personal relationship with.
Yep.
But they were really good at what they did, and I was able to keep them gainfully employed and, things like that. But basically it's that determine what's the mission, what are we here to achieve, who's got the skills, who doesn't, how can I, what's the opportunity in those people that don't have the skills? Because people that are really skillful for whatever you're doing, they're easy to find a role for.
Yep.
Because you automatically just fit right in and you just kind of get out of their way and go. But the ones who don't, but they're still a part of the team, well, let's find them something to do, kind of like you said. I probably don't have a good example like that, but I think it's perfect. You found a job, he's gainfully employed, actually away from everybody else, so some of that other stuff fell off. And, everybody works well together. And I think that's probably one of the hardest things in any organ. So if you want to work in an organization where there's no conflict within people, then have nobody work there.
Yep.
I mean, that's just it. Because people are people, they're human. Everybody has different personalities. Not everybody's going to get along, but if you can get, I guess, 80% of the day to move in the right direction, you're doing really well.
Yeah.
And that's where it comes back. It's a bit of a controversial statement if you just listen to what I'm about to say on face value, not listen to the reason behind. But, people say there's no place for DEI in the military. And I agree with that, but not in the fact that I don't recognize other people's differences. It's in the fact that I could care less what the color of your skin is, what religion you practice, what your sexual orientation is. I don't care. I'm going to have your back and you're going to have mine. We're all there to do a job. And I can tell you there's some people that in the Army, like I said, we would never be friends outside. But if I have to go on a mission today, I would have them right there next to me. I wouldn't think twice about it. And that's where it is. And I actually talked about that a little bit in one of my books. I can't remember if it was the first one or the second one, where we had a saying, we're all green. We're all green. Not meaning that we're new, meaning that that's the color of our uniforms and we're all the same. And that's what I mean by that. It's not necessarily that we can't celebrate our differences, that there is no difference. I don't care where you're from, what your native language is, whatever. I'm going to have your back and I expect you to have mine. And you build those bonds in that relationship. So it's a proven there that regardless of where you're from, or what your background is, you can work with anybody. And I think that's a perfect example. But I think we tend to reduce people down to those things in a civilian environment. And I go, we hire people based on their skills and their attitude. We don't hire people based on all these other demographics. And so why are we reducing them to that in a normal working environment? And I actually have an issue with that, and it's like, well, someone, I'm going to refer to them by their name or what they asked me to refer to them by. I'm going to treat them with respect. And I think that's part of the issue I have right now with just this modern society. It's almost like we're in a race to the bottom, and there's a real lack of respect, just in general. And I've always taught, and I teach James the same thing: treat everybody with respect. Like I think we talked about General Mathis from used to be a commandant of the Marine Corps. In the U.S., he had a saying, treat everybody with respect, but have a plan to kill everybody in the room. And I love that.
Hoorah! But no, I think you're right, mate, because it's always policy and bureaucracy that gets in the way at the end of the day. You can have a DEI policy, but it's the enforcement of it that undermines the foundation of whatever enterprise it is. But if you have an open policy of anyone can do anything, let's have the standardized testing. And if we end up with 60 females over 2 platoons in special forces are heavy hitters and they are the best at that job, absolutely, all for it. But it hasn't stacked up that way because we have that in our military at the moment. We've had a bunch of women try out for commandos and SAS selection. They come very close, but just didn't have the physical capability to do that specific niche role of being on the front line, carrying a 50 kilo pack for days on end. Okay, cool. But they can be a hell of a good 50 cal gunner or a sniper cell or work an int, unbelievable at int work. You know, so as long as the door's open, fill the roles, but they haven't filled up. Why? Well, because they don't want to live out bush and snipe people from 2Ks away like we want to do.
And there's a lot of males that can't do that.
100%, absolutely. But the door's open for everybody of every faith, religion, sex, whatever it is, to do any job they want to do, and it will naturally take shape. It's only when you try to force those outcomes on a business, it undermines the productivity and the strength of that business.
That's it. Yeah, it's either you do the job or you don't. For me, I could care less what your background is, whatever. It's either you do the job or you don't.
Yep.
You know, that's how I am. That's how it is in the military, though. You either do it or you don't.
Totally.
Period.
Yep.
And sometimes it has to be like that because you have people that, again, with a lot of, and I say, you know, a lot of the young people now, they expect it, the instant gratification. Well, I showed up, I should be given this, you know, like everybody gets an award. No, it's not like that. But I can remember me saying, the young generation now, they don't know what it's like to work for something. But I can remember people saying that about me when I was like,
100%.
Oh, you young kids, you don't know what it's like to work for anything. It's like, well, you know what? You're right. I didn't then. But I had to go and I had to work for stuff to get it. I had to mature, you know, to realize that. And, you know, so it's easy to say. But James and I were recently over in Canberra at the War Memorial. And we were asked on behalf of the Historical Arms and Military Society of Tasmania to lay a wreath on behalf of all Tasmanians who have served at the War Memorial. And that was a huge honor. But as we're getting lined up, there's a couple young fellas there and young ladies too that were kind of lining everybody up, taking us through the briefing, what's going to happen. And it kind of restores your faith in humanity to see these young people, and they were very respectful. They were all actually, nearly all of them were waiting to go into the ADF. They were kind of in that pipeline going through and just waiting on the ship date or whatever. And talking to them, just how they carried themselves, you go, yeah, we're going to be okay. You know, versus what you hear on the news now with all the youth crime and stuff like that. And you go, oh shit, what's happening? You know, what's the world going to look like in 20 years? And then you come across, you know, these they're all in their teens, you know, young men and women. You go, we're going to be okay. Like there's still a lot of good in this world. The majority, absolutely, mate. Yeah, I agree. And it's that. And that's where you have to be careful of the narrative you feed into your own mind every day. Exactly.
If you're constantly watching that mainstream media and getting one narrative, it can change your perception and outlook on life, which will change your behavior, then your outcomes in your own life. Yeah. Be very careful.
Exactly. I was listening to it was a podcast. I'm trying to remember the fellow's name, but he wrote the book Key Person of Influence and ran that program. He's Australian. I think he lives in Europe now, actually. He had actually talked about when he was a young fellow, you know, just kind of right out of school, and one of his first jobs, and someone who taught him really how to be successful, changed his mind, you know, around his thinking. But one of the things, there's a couple of things he told him to do. One of them was carry $1,000 in cash in your pocket, because, you know, we'd do that. And he said he was always scared someone was going to come belt him up and take it because they knew he had it, you know, they're going to take it. And that was getting used to being comfortable with money, where most people aren't.
Yep.
But the other one was, he told him, never watch the news. He goes, the news is almost always bad. It's always about things that have already happened. You can't change it. So, and that gets you really just focusing on this negative stuff all the time, because the negative headlines, they sell, you know, and that's what people want, the drama, you know, and that's what people talk about. And, and I thought, wow, that's some really good advice. Like you said, don't get caught up in the drama that you see on social media and the news and everywhere else. And actually, there's another, colleague of mine who works in another organization here in Tasmania. He travels the world a lot. He does a lot with like Habitat for Humanity and other organizations like that. And he goes and builds houses and whatever, you know, volunteers his time. And we're having a conversation one night over dinner, and there's several of us at this dinner, and we were talking, and he said, I find, you know, generally people are good everywhere in the world, you know, and they're always happy and stuff. And that's his perception. I thought about mine. Well, usually when I was sent somewhere in the world for a good bit of my life, it was for something really bad, and there weren't good people, and we were dealing with bad people. And you're always having head on a swivel, because someone's out to get you.
Mm.
And just those two perceptions, I thought about that and I said, what, I wish I had that perception whenever I travel places.
Yep.
It's interesting to go to some of these countries. And just a few years ago, I went to East Timor to do some work. But landing in Dili, you get out and there's the rubbish burning and the smells and all that, and you automatically
brings back the
yeah. So you're automatically you're on high alert. You're looking around, and it's a fairly safe place now.
Yep.
You can walk around there. You're not going to get mugged or something like that. Just like anywhere else, you still have to be security conscious, but
yep.
There's not a sniper waiting down the road or something like that. But you get in these perceptions, and it's all developed off this experience where. A good example, one day James and I were walking down the street in Brisbane. He goes, "Oh, what would you be thinking if you're in the Army?" I said, "Well, what I'm thinking right now is I'm looking at this going, we're in a fatal funnel. Where can I strong point from? Where's the outs,
the military
like
brain, I love it. Even when I work at Salamanca, I sell my books there. I don't know how many times I've run over an active shooter situation in my mind there at the market. It's like, okay, here the pops go off up there. What would you do? And just run through that whole scenario, which is, it's weird for people to hear. But I find a vital tool in part of our programming from the military that I've hung on to because I use it on all my expeditions. We use it when we travel to new places, but it can't be a behavior that becomes the dominant.
Yeah.
Like you can't walk around thinking that every single guy here, fighting age male, is going to try and kill us.
Yeah.
Because then it all goes bad from there, So everything in balance.
Yeah, I'm on this side of the road, so I'm looking at this side of the road. I'm watching these windows. I'm looking at this rooftop.
Can't be that.
Yeah.
Whereas my beautiful, innocent wife and her beautiful mind just, la-di-da, banging along. It's like, us men, we're providing a safe environment for you to flourish.
And I just mentioned your wife. And we talked about the team around you.
Yep.
I know she's been on an expedition.
Oh, tons now, tons, yeah.
And so you make a really good team in that aspect.
And she's a monumental adventure in her own right.
Yeah, and published author as well.
Yep.
Yeah, which is great. And you guys did the Gobi Desert together.
Yep, that was her first expedition with me. Yeah. First big one. We'd done a lot of traveling and some smaller stuff together. That was her first big 2-month-long dragging a cart across the Gobi Desert in Mongolia. Yeah. It was mega.
Incredible. I remember when I did my MBA in the finance course, the lecturer, the first day, made a statement. He said, all those things you're going to learn about finance and stuff and everything you've learned, he goes, it doesn't matter. He said, the most important financial decision you ever make in your life is who you marry. And that's exactly right, because marriages, when they break up, the amount of fortunes that have been lost because of that and everything else and the angst. But coming back to that, having someone that is not only capable but willing to come with you and support you, how important has that been in your success and in your life, to have someone that you're aligned with like that?
Oh, mate, it is probably one of the biggest pillar in my life is having my wife, and especially because she loves adventure and expeditions, we get to enjoy this life together. If I was going off on tours of 2 months, 3 months by myself, coming back, it'd just never work.
Yeah.
But when we met, I was post-military, post-7 summits at that stage, and I wanted to be a pretend businessman for a while, had a few gyms in Sydney, and that was all good. There were some successes, some failures, but I realised, that hardcore business life wasn't for me, and we went back to travelling and adventure. But when I met my wife, we decided to both start from a position of raw honesty. So I told her all about my military past, all about the demon days, the drug addiction, the criminality that bled in there from time to time in the youth, everything. So you have to start from this foundation of absolute truth. When we did that, mate, it's just flourished. We're 10 years in now, never had an argument. We've had 2 quiet times, not one fight.
Yeah.
But it's because it just started from that very humble, honest, raw place. Yeah. But now we get to live this beautiful life of 3 to 4 expeditions a year together. We both write books, we both tell stories, and now it's just a roller coaster. It's beautiful.
It's incredible.
Yeah, super happy, very happy.
Yeah, and I meet so many people that, I'll say they're bad, but they're not happy in their relationship. Or you meet people that they say they're happy, but then they really just talk down about their spouse and stuff like that. And you go, well, why are you married? If it's that bad, you're being treated that bad, or so you just love the drama. Mate,
that's your best mate. That's your sniper number 2. She's got to have your back through everything, but she's got to know who you are.
Exactly.
So maybe that person you're referring to didn't never have that conversation. They're trying to pretend they're somebody else, or maybe they thought she was somebody else, and eventually it just doesn't fly.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I guess for me, I've always felt like a lot of my success isn't necessarily due to me. Like I put in the work, but I say 80% of my success is due to other people. Either give me the opportunity, supporting me through it, or whenever you're part of that team, the work that they do on the team, that leads to my own success. So it's important that I put together a good team and support them as much as I can.
Totally.
But the same thing I think is in any relationship too. It's mutually supporting that. A lot of your own success potentially is due to them either being there, being by your side, doing it with you, or doing other tasks so you can do these other tasks. Or whatever.
Something to bounce ideas off, share your fears, anxieties, hash it out. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I talk about, leadership, my second book, The Leadership Path, where a lot of it's focused on self-leadership. And, I'm a firm believer that you can look at someone and the things they're doing in their life and how they lead themselves will translate into how they'll lead other things. It's like what prior success determines future success and things. And I think that's such a big part of ourselves, where it's realizing we're not in it alone. We're not going to achieve alone. Like, we still have to put in the work. No one can do the work for us, but when it comes to true success, it's not always going to be just about us. So
if it's ever, with that probably only true if you placed a monumental gambling bet and you won big time. That'd be the only time it's ever just been on you and the algorithm struck for you that day. Outside of that, in the real world, mate, it's a tribal world. We need people. We're a social being. What do we do with anyone we want to get information out of? We put them in solitary confinement, keep them in the dark 2-3 days, mate. They'll tell you whatever you want. We're not built that way. Our nervous system needs constant stimulation. Yeah.
Great point. I guess been talking for a little while now, but any closing thoughts or something that you would want to leave someone with? Someone who's sitting here listening to this right now going, you know what, the stuff he's done, I've always wanted to do that. Maybe they're having a midlife crisis. Maybe they're struggling. Someone who's just recently left the military emergency services and they're transitioning from one career to another, or they've just left a relationship or something. What is some advice, like this last bit of advice, that you would give them who's saying, I want to do that?
There's one thing Elise and I do, my wife Elise. Whenever I find myself in a bit of a no man's land trying to decide what to do, we bust out a nice whiskey, we'll sit down on the couch, we'll get a pen and paper, and we ask ourselves a question. And the question is, what if we die in 5 years' time? What do we want to achieve between now and our death? Now, it's easy to say, but you have to really think about that cognitively and believe it. Okay, this is 5 years. It's our last 5 years on this planet alive together. What do we want to achieve? And you take a little sip and then you get your pen out and write down what really comes to mind. And I guarantee you, it won't be the mortgage and the money and the career and all that stuff. It'll be things that come out that are built on that value and meaning, and little things, little gems that have sat there dormant in your life for years and years. So whatever you write down when you go through that process, really focus on that list, and now you must action it. That doesn't mean you got to quit your job, run off into the bush and wear a bloody hair shirt, all right? Yeah. But you just start to splice in that stuff, because that's what's really going to matter to you, and that will have monumental change on your life. There's no telling where you will end up after going through that process and taking action on your trajectory.
Excellent. Excellent. I think that's great advice. And I know it's actually the theme of one of your third book, I believe it was.
Yeah. And that came about, well, it emerged quite naturally. We'd seen quite a bit of death along the way on expeditions, first in the military and then on expeditions. So it changed our own relationship with mortality. So I go, well, if we're going to keep pushing this adventure life, this is a reality that could eventuate. So let's be honest with it. What if it's over in 5? What do we really want to do?
That's excellent advice. No, thank you for that. And thanks for coming on the podcast and agreeing to the conversation. I think it's great. And I think there's definitely a lot of value here for anybody to take away from. So thank you very much.
Pleasure to be here, mate. It's a great conversation. Let's do it again.